And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Tension on deck. Welcome to the Executive Perspective on New York's finest retired and unfiltered network. How you doing, Rob?
Good. How are you, Ron? How's everything going?
I'm doing well. Getting ready for a good show today. We're going to talk about body-worn cameras, whether they're friends or foes of everybody, of members of the NYPD, the law enforcement community overall, as well as the community at large. So it's a good topic. It's always being spoken about. I see in the comments that we have a few of our friends watching. Joe Mango, Pat Donahue, Amazing Ant. Good evening to you. How's everything going?
Good. I'm up here. My son-in-law's stepson's apartment. He took me to the gym yesterday. He broke my arms basically in two, but I'm doing well. At my age, you know, in the gym for a long time, you kind of got to get a wheelchair to get you out of there.
Yeah.
But he's a good kid, so enjoying my time with him. So it was weird for spring break for Florida people. I think we come north. That's what it is. That's our spring break.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, just before we start, I just want to give everybody a shout out and a thank you for all their support to Eric Dim, his son Derek, and the family for the continued support, the continued financial support, the continued support spiritually, for the prayers, and the support of Laguna Beach Police Department and Fire Department, who continue to support them while Derek is at home in hospice fighting this cause. So we're not going to give up hope, and we're going to continue to pray for a miracle cure. So we have some developing stories going on, right, in the NYPD. Just came out that the commanding officer of a transit district was removed from his command for fudging the numbers, something that happens from time to time. Some people think it happens more than it doesn't. I tend not to believe that. I hope not to believe that. When I was a commanding officer, I was very strict with my people that it is what it is, that the numbers are the numbers. And I just sent out a post on my X and said basically that your job is to report the crime and address the crime. That's your job. Nobody has ever gotten ahead by fudging the numbers. It's a false sense of getting ahead, that if you think that your numbers are low and your crime numbers are low, that you're going to be rewarded. I've seen it time and time again where that's not the case. It's not the case. The people that are successful are people that know how to analyze crime properly, that know how to formulate crime strategy plans and address those crimes in the proper manner in order to reduce those crimes. What are your feelings about this, Rob?
Oh, I totally agree. Just a shout out to Patrick Donahue from this morning. Did a great job. You know, went long with John and Eric, but he really did a great job. Very interesting story. As far as, you know, the CO changing numbers and stuff, yeah, we see that occasionally comes here and there. You know, it's a sad thing, because I think what a lot of times they do is they try to reduce the numbers in order to make it look better for them that they're actually reducing crime, and then somebody downtown is going to notice them and say, hey, this guy deserves a promotion. So in my opinion, it's basically, you know, promotion driven. And what I think they should do, and the right thing to do, is take those numbers and, you know, put them all in. And then, you know what, if you have one bad year, guess what? Next year, it could be better, right? And then it's your crime reduction, right? So you got, like you just said, you got to do plans. You got to put things together. What do we always say? Put the pins on the dots, right? That's all it is, and reduce that crime. It's sad that they just came out recently with, you know, crime statistics in transit and say that it's all, you know, being lowered and everything else, and that kind of whether or not it's, it's true or not now, but that kind of skews all the other numbers and all the other good work that the other COs have done. So it kind of gives it's a tarnish, it's a bad thing to do, and it kind of hurts the department in a whole. And I mean, I can understand, hope I haven't seen anything from the CEA, basically, the Captain's Endowment Association supporting him or anything else, but apparently there looks like there's a little bit of evidence, within that New York Post article. But let's hope no other COs are doing and learn from that. It's not worth it. It's definitely not. The guy loses his command, and now what happens, Ron? He's benched for how long? Right before he can get back in the game.
If he can even get back in the game, and it's not even just that. I always had the saying, and it's the cliche of it is what it is, right? And I used to tell my supervisors all the time, and I've said this on prior podcasts, at the bottom of my CO's meetings, we have the payday meetings. I didn't have them all the time because I didn't want to, if I had something going on, I'd address it as it goes along, and then I'd keep a note if there's something I want to bring up the CO's meeting on the payday meeting, right? And I used to say, I had it right in the bottom on the footer, right, of my CO's meeting agenda. Never compromise your integrity for the sake of activity, because it's not worth it. I'm never going to yell at you because you bring me a crime. I do know and have worked with people that were on top of everybody for every little crime, put a lot of pressure on people. They put a lot of undue pressure on themselves. Listen, being a precinct commander is not an easy, or PSA or transit district commander are not easy positions. There is pressure from everywhere. There's pressure from downtown. There's pressure from the community. There's pressure from your borough. But you have to just do your job, and your job is to address the conditions of your command. Number one, if the crimes aren't being reported properly, you can't do a proper analysis. Therefore, you can't do a proper deployment, and you can't assess to see if your plan is working. So what you're doing is you're starting this whole snowball effect, and it's just going to run downhill, and it's going to land on top of you. But unfortunately, as it's going down the hill, he's taking down people with him. These two sergeants and lieutenant that allegedly, and again, it's all alleged. Nobody's been convicted of anything. The department, confirmed that there was an audit in the paper, confirmed there was an audit, and that there were anomalies, and it appeared that some crimes were intentionally misclassified. That's not a good thing to say. That's not a good thing. So those two sergeants, that lieutenant, they're in for a world of trouble also with discipline for being involved in that. But the other side of it too is we're not serving. When you do that, you're not serving the victim. You're victimizing the victim once again, because the victim is not getting the appropriate attention for the crime that was committed against them, whether it was a robbery or a grand larceny. If it comes down as a petty larceny or a lost property, it's going to go by the wayside. The squad's not going to look at it. There's going to be no chance of them getting due process. And listen, there may not be anything they could have done about these things, whatever the case may be. And transit crime is so low to begin with. I was a lieutenant in transit, and I was surprised to see that throughout the entire transit system, on a daily basis, they average like 3 crimes a day. 3 to 5 crimes a day they average for the entire system. Crimes, when I mean crimes, I'm talking about the 7 major felonies.
Right.
And so in Transit District 20, which isn't one of the busiest transit districts, how much lower is he trying to shave these numbers? And like you said, to look good, to try and get the bump because he was a captain. So he was maybe trying to get promoted to DI, or maybe he was trying to get a numbered command, which some people think is more prestigious than being a transit district commander. Listen, I was a commanding officer at 2 different precincts, one slow command, one very busy command. Where did I get promoted? I got promoted out of the slow command. Okay. And when you go to ComStat, there's an expression that every time you go to the podium, it's a job interview. How do you get to the podium? You usually get to the podium when your command isn't doing well, and they want to see how you're handling it. I used to kind of a little bit complain and say, I never get my shot when I'm in the 111 because our numbers were so low. Even if I was up in crime, the numbers were so low that they weren't really affecting the borough's numbers. So they would go to the busier commands. So as the 111 CO, I hardly went up to the podium. And I kind of felt cheated, as crazy as people might think that sounds, because you have this mindset that it is the job interview when you get to the podium. And are they really recognizing that you're doing a good job when crime is down? So they want to see. And I went to CompStat, my goodness, since 2003 until I retired last year. The year, CompStat the year before, because I was pretty much out for a year. And you see that people go to that podium and you know right away, do they know? And we could talk about CompStat, for the whole podcast. This is just, an opening subject, but it's not worth it. It's not worth it for so many reasons. You're giving up your integrity. You're compromising other people's integrity. You're putting pressure on other people. And somebody's always going to drop a log because the cops are out there. It's another undue pressure on the cop that's out there that goes out and does his or her job, takes a complaint report, brings it in, and now the complaint reports get manipulated and supposedly signatures were being forged. Again, all alleged, but that's what was in the article, that signatures were even being forged. I mean, I've seen crimes reduced. I've seen narratives adjusted with callbacks and re-interviewing of the complainants. Terry Manane is saying that it's been going on for years. Yeah, absolutely. And let me tell you, there's been some very creative ways where people would manipulate prior crime numbers and up crimes in the past so that their numbers would look better now, and then decrease crimes after the CompStat period had passed. Listen, it's old, but it's new again. And you're not creating do your job. Do the job that you were selected to go there and command. You were selected to go there and command that transit district. Somebody saw something in you and potential in you to go there and be a commanding officer. It's a very select few that get that privilege. And he just blew it. It says he was demoted. He wasn't demoted because he was a captain. So I'm sure that he's passed his probationary period. Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I would assume that he's passed his probationary period. And when he was made commanding officer of this command, what he was he was reassigned to the court section, which is, punishment. I didn't see that he was modified or anything like that, which means, his gun and shield was taken away. But it's sort of a demotion because, you're on a career trajectory as a commanding officer. You're on the path to either go to a busier command, get promoted, whatever the case may be. So, and again, the victims are not just you. It's not just you. It's those sergeants, the lieutenant, and the complainants that are all, now what?
I also think that the poor cops on patrol are a victim as well, because now you've put undue pressure on them when they're out there, because if they know their original 61 complaint report, that's what we call 61, your original 61 is downgraded by somebody in crime analysis or whatever on the basis of the CO. The next time they go to a job, they're going to be hesitant to take that report, right? Because they don't want to, in other words, send it back in, and then the CO is going to come in and say, what are you doing to me? You're killing me here with these crimes. There's 7 majors. You're killing me. So it sets a bad tone all around. And like you said, what about the victim? If I'm a victim of a robbery and all of a sudden now they downgrade it to an assault and a grand larceny, which we know is not supposed to be the case or whatever, or even just a simple assault, that my wallet fell out of my pocket and it was a petty larceny or whatever, right? So, I mean, all that manipulation, it's just a downfall of that particular person. And like you said, it has a cascading effect on everybody involved. So I think when they meant he was demoted, I think that was basically that he lost his command. They often say that when somebody's a CO and they suddenly become, taken out of that particular spot, it's a demotion, but we all know it's not. He was just the same rank as a captain. But yeah, terrible thing. And Patrick, Donnie says, the post is confirming it, but, we don't know for sure. We're basing our conversation tonight on the post. Let's hope it's not. And then he bounces back and he didn't do these things. And he gets his recognition that he deserves, or he gets the discipline that he deserves if he did do it.
Yeah. And let's see how Commissioner Tish is going to handle this also. She's one of the things we're going to be talking about today is discipline. And, she has made statements and promises of stronger discipline. So, but we'll get into that a little bit later. It's just sad to see. It really is, because he looks like a young guy. Patrick's putting up here. He was hired in 2008. He was promoted in January 23. So yeah, he's off his probationary period. I don't think he'll be terminated, Pat. I think that he's definitely going to be in for some hard days ahead. But Ray John is saying every CO that every CO does it that I've ever worked for. Some are blatant, others are more careful. As a rookie sergeant, I stood up to my CO about a church burglary. Well, Ray John, I'm sorry to hear about that. And there's also misperceptions. I don't think anybody that's ever worked for me will ever make a statement like that about me. I would hope not, because I was never like that. But I would call people out on certain complaints and question certain things, because listen, there are technicalities. There's technicalities on what's a burglary, what's not a burglary, what's a trespass, what's a robbery versus a grand larceny, what's a grand larceny versus a lost property versus an identity theft. And there are technicalities that sometimes the cops don't understand, and they think that it's one thing and it's not. And the CO is not, or the crime analysis team is not, quote unquote, as someone put in there, shit canning or manipulating the numbers. They're playing by the rules. But I'm not denying that it doesn't happen. I know that there were people that are putting very undue pressure on people out there to not bring in those numbers. So, it's sad. It's sad.
No, I mean, I agree with what Marlon's saying. You have a feeling that he's not the only one in transit doing that. There's a lot of pressure right now to reduce the, crime in transit. And with pressure comes sometimes weakness, and with weakness comes the person makes mistakes, So I'm hoping that it's not the case, but yeah, could it be? Absolutely. When there's so much pressure on it, it coming from above. It might not even be him. It could be somebody up above him pressuring him. So, I mean, you never know where the pressure comes from. And, with transit in the news every day and, people being pushed and burned in the subway, I mean, there's obviously concern.
I understand your point, but it's never going to be okay.
No.
And so,
well,
listen, I hope that it's not happening elsewhere, and that people are sticking by their integrity. Your executive is supposed to lead by example, and we need strong leaders in the NYPD. We talk about it all the time. We need strong leaders and strong leadership. And this, to me, is not strong leadership. It's selfishness, and that's going to take his career down and take other people's career down. But
yeah, no, I agree. I think that captain's got to forge ahead. If if those crimes were there, then put them down and deal with it. That's it. And maybe that's some of the training that a CO should get. Just to make sure. I mean, you think it's common sense, but who knows if the training, your little Comstat college, they used to call it, right? So those little things that maybe would have helped that person out, and just speaking of training, right? We look at there's a new big indoor police shooting range being brought up on Rodman's Neck. Can you imagine that, right? How many years you were over there, and you would go to City Island for lunch, right? You'd hear the shots being fired. I mean, it's definitely true. There's definitely there was a large contingency of gunfire being heard across the little pond there, And I think they're finally going to change that. I think they've allocated a certain amount of money, and they're going to make a indoor range. Ron, there's differences between shooting outside, right, in the weather and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
then shooting indoors. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very good point that you're bringing up, because the positive about being at Rodman's Neck, and listen, the last time I shot at Rodman's Neck to qualify before I retired. I went out to Rodman's Neck. I shot my qualification round so I can get my 218 license, upon retirement. But prior to that, I've shot at the indoor ranges at One Police Plaza, the old Academy, and Avenue X for as long as I can remember. And it's absolutely a difference. You're not dealing with the weather. You're not dealing with the elements. And there is something to be said with shooting out in the elements, because when you're out on patrol and where you're going to get involved in most confrontations where you're going to have to shoot your firearm, you're going to be outside. And you always want to train to your environment that you're going to be working in. Now, I know they're keeping open two outdoor ranges. Hopefully, there'll be the tactical portions of the ranges so that people can still go through those tactical courses of fire, which are better than standing on line, a couple of 7 shots at 25 yards, and the rest, you can throw the bullets at it and qualify. But there's another portion of it that also I read in the article, it's a 24/7 facility. So there's a couple of different things with that. Now, we've talked in the past, or I don't know if it was even online or offline. I know Eric and John have talked about it. And training is always a huge topic. And with it being open 24 hours, now, again, you're going to need more range instructors. So you're going to have to pull some more people off patrol and get into the specialty. Because that's another one of those positions that you don't get just because you know somebody. You really have to be a marksman to be a range instructor, from everything that I've known. And they're going to have to pick up some more range instructors if they are going to go around the clock. Now, are they going to go around the clock and give officers the opportunity to go by while they're on tour to qualify? Like, instead of having a whole tour assigned to the range where you go there and you have a little lecture time, you get lunch, then you get your early blow. An early blow to those non-NYPD people, or you get cut loose early from before your tour is over? Or, are they going to go to some type of thing where you can go by while you're working, like they're doing a lot of other agencies, and you can qualify while you're working? Also, like we discussed offline, that if I work midnights and I have to go shoot on the day tour, it messes up my whole routine. It messes up my whole schedule. So if I'm a midnight cop and I can go qualify at the range while I'm on my regular tour, I'd much rather do that too. But who's to know what that was like one little line in the article. It's going to be 24/7. They didn't talk about any kind of training or specialized training or anything else.
Yeah, you know what you also miss? You also miss the mosquitoes that are biting you while you're trying to shoot right out there on the range. And then, I don't know, they also talked about a new cafeteria. So I'm just wondering if there's those meatball sandwiches prepared by the corrections office, or the prisoners, prepared by prisoners. Are they going to be out? Or are they going to be a 24/7 operation too?
Yeah.
I remember the first time I went to the range, I didn't know. I figured, all right, meatball sandwich. I ate it. I don't know. I don't know what I ate, bro. After that, that was it, man. Once I saw the orange jumpsuits in the back, with the, I said, I'm good, man. I'm good. I'll skip this meal.
I'm sure it'll be a vendor, probably. If they're gonna have a cafeteria, it may be like the police academy, where it's an outside vendor that runs the cafeteria at the police academy.
Maybe, yeah.
So maybe on a smaller scale, they'll put out some type of bid, and if Adams is in place, one of his friends will get the contract, and they'll be able to do that. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's about time. I think that, a new up-to-date modern facility is needed. You know, we have to keep up with the times.
Yeah. No, I just hope that they don't, if they let you train on your day that you're working, let's say a midnight platoon, they said, hey, Sector Adam, you know, Ron and Rob, go to the range, go qualify, and then come back and go 98. You know, that's fine, but then I think you're losing a training opportunity also. So, you know, there's always training. You just go there and shoot and you qualify. That's great. You come back. But I hope that they give them other training days, you know, other tactical training days and stuff, and they just don't end it there. That it's just like, oh, you know, oh, there's a quick thing and we get the guy back on patrol because, you know, they're short, right? They're short personnel right now. So it's a great fix. I mean, it's not going to be done for a while anyway. I think the construction is going to take a long time, but you know, who knows what's not in their head. So, but
yeah. All right. Well, I think we got a good show coming up today, a good topic. We're going to talk about body worn cameras, you know, whether they are a positive or a negative, how they're perceived. We're going to talk about some legal aspects of it, and we're going to talk about ramifications. We're going to talk about how body worn cameras are used throughout the nation in policing, I think, as opposed to the way the NYPD is handling body worn cameras. That's my perspective on it, and we'll get into that. But just as a little background for the listeners on how it came about with the NYPD, in 2013, we had the settlement agreement on the federal lawsuit with the Stop, Question, and Frisk lawsuit. So it took a few years. They had to do some, you know, bidding out. They had to do some work with the unions to compensate the cops for something that wasn't in their prior agreements. And in 2017, they started rolling it out. It rolled out and completed in about 2019. There were two different types of cameras. There was the V-View and the Axon cameras. Then in 2020, actually, the Assembly passed a bill that actually mandated the New York State Police to also wear body-worn cameras. And when they started rolling it out, they touted it as it's going to reduce complaints on cops. It's going to increase prosecutions. It's going to reduce crime. It's going to make policing more transparent because you'll be able to see things. And it's going to make better police community relations. That's how they touted it, Rob. What were your initial thoughts when you heard, you know, back in early 2014, 15, that we were actually going to be getting them? What were your initial thoughts?
I mean, it sounded great, right? I mean, listen, hopefully body-worn cameras would give a police officer perspective, right, that normally regular people wouldn't see. It would also reduce the amount of CCRBs, because when somebody started the conversation with, hey, F you, officer, and then they accuse you of cursing at them or being disrespectful or discourteous, when in fact it wasn't you, right? Now there was evidence with that. And then anytime there may have been the thought of a possibly, you know, a shooting that didn't look as good as it should be, there was now body-worn camera that could actually, you know, support the officer. So yeah, it all sounded great to me in the beginning. It sounded like, hey, this is very positive, and it's gonna be good for the police officer because it's gonna help them. So I mean, there's a video from a professor, a former police officer, weighing the pros and cons of that actual you know, that thought, you know, when he actually, you know, thought about getting body-worn cameras. So if we could play from 120 to 210, his quick thoughts.
Research has demonstrated that body-worn cameras hasn't necessarily impacted both police behavior behind the badge and also citizen behavior on the other side of the badge. So while they're positive and the reception to them are mainly positive, it's been sort of a lukewarm effect.
Do you think that the conversation should be at large more about training police officers rather than the mechanism that would be much more reactive to a situation?
Well, certainly we need to put a lot of investment in training, and I think most police officers call for that, as well as citizens. But we also have to evaluate how well the training is taking place.
I would say that's another good point, Ron. Just real quick, he talks about obviously that what they thought it was going to happen, it didn't seem to to happen, right? And then it didn't have any real basic impact, but they talked about using it for training. And I'm not so sure the NYPD has used a lot of it for training as well. Not as much as I believe they should.
Yeah, we're going to get into all of that. We're definitely going to get into all of that as we go on in the conversation. I agree with you. My initial thoughts were definitely I was pro body worn camera. I'm still pro body worn camera, to be honest, and we'll talk about different reasons why throughout the show. One of the other things it does, though, and it was touted for doing, would also be to reduce. When I say reduce complaints on cops, it's not just reducing, civilian complaints against cops because they had cameras on and now they could, verify and they could, discount frivolous complaints. We'll talk about that a little bit too, but also keeping cops in check. Knowing that they have the body camera on, it kind of keeps them in check from maybe losing their cool. It's another layer to, instead of your partner grabbing you by the shoulder, you're wearing a camera, you might not go that extra step. And so reducing of force complaints was supposed to be getting, being brought down as a result of the body worn cameras. So the NYPD implements body worn cameras. Like I said, it rolled out in 2017. They put out a very detailed patrol guide procedure on it. I'm not going to get into it. It's 9 pages long. But I think the important things are, it's to visually and orderly record certain interactions between uniformed members of the service and the public for law enforcement purposes. Then it gives a definition, right? The police action. What's a police action? Any police service. We could stop right there. I don't have to read anything further past any police service, because really it's everything and anything except for going to the bathroom and getting yourself a cup of coffee, right? So it's any police service as well as law enforcement or investigative activity conducted in furtherance of official duties. Police action includes responding to calls of service, addressing quality of life conditions, handling pickup assignments, and self-initiated investigative or enforcement actions such as witness canvasses, vehicle stops, and investigative encounters. Routine consensual conversations with members of the public carried out as part of community engagement efforts are not considered police actions under this section. And you go down just a little bit further, and you're supposed to position the body-worn camera to facilitate an optimal recording field of view. Attach the body-worn camera to the outermost garment in the vicinity of the breast pocket of the uniform shirt, duty jacket, or garment used for plain clothes assignment using mounting hardware provided. So we're going to stop right there with that. We'll get back to that a little bit more. But so basically they're saying you got to activate it at any time. We don't even really, do we have to get any further into it? It's
I think they should have put when you're not supposed to activate it, because
Right.
otherwise it should just be activated, right?
And there is a list. There's a list. I'm not even going to get into it because it's basically the only time that you're not supposed to activate it. And it says not to activate it or for confidentiality reasons, talking to CIs, victims of sex crimes. Once you find out they're a victim of a sex crime, you're supposed to turn it off. And, when you're talking to our legal bureau and, things like that. But one of the things I think is important to point out is the placement, right? You're placing it on your breast pocket. So first of all, it's not giving you the same view that you have at your head level. It's also not giving you a peripheral view. It's giving you a view. It gives you a wide view, but it doesn't give you a whole peripheral view. And it doesn't have any type of human element involved. So you have to worry about all these things when you're dealing with body-worn cameras. So it goes on. It goes on for the mandatory activations, right? Any police action, once again. And then, just going down to number 6, it just starts telling you begin recording prior to arrival at an incident location or prior to commencing any self-initiated police action. Activate it as soon as possible if you're taking unanticipated or exigent occurrences take place. This is when they came up with the dashboard to dashboard. They want you to turn on the camera before you left the car and then don't turn it off till you get back in the car. Then they changed it to they wanted you putting it on as soon as you got to the assignment so that you can see it when you're going on the assignment. And then there's other things, a lot of stuff administratively where you have to document and maintain it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to go down, and for every time that you activate your camera, you have to go to a drop-down list and you have to categorize every single activation. You have to also add metadata, right? If you have an investigative encounter, you have to put the final level of the encounter for all level 2s that don't come into for all level 2 encounters that don't escalate beyond level 2, which means they're not being arrested. Then you have to put in the race and the gender. You have to do all this in your next 2 scheduled tours. And then if you have an arrest, you have to add in all of that. You have to add in your summonses, you have to add in your stop report, any paperwork has to be attached to this. So there's a lot of administrative work that comes with it also. And it's very burdensome and time consuming for every interaction that you have to go in there. Now, there is accessibility on your phone. You can go on your department issued smartphone and you can go in there and you can add these things. You can start tagging everything. What do how do you feel about the way it was rolled out and the stipulations of when you have to record?
I think when it was originally rolled out, there weren't so many things you had to activate it for. I think TC said it earlier. Eventually, they started adding things, and they kept going on and on. I know when ESU started it, it's right there. So they gradually added more times to activate it when it started by the jobs weren't recorded. I remember ESU had a big issue because they weren't one of the first they weren't one of the first commands to actually have body worn cameras. And it was like, when are we going to activate it? If we're at a TAC meeting and we're discussing somebody's, apartment or where we're going to hit the place, or, who gave us the information, was it from a CI or anything else? All this information, and was in fact that body worn camera, it was buffering, right? So, every 30 seconds or 60 seconds, it was getting video at least. I mean, what other things were happening with that? And who has accessibility to it? And then what happens when it goes to trial? And now all the stuff that comes out on this body worn camera is who gave this person up? Was it a CI, a confidential informant? Was it a loved one that ratted somebody out? So I mean, it just kind of snowballed into now recording it for everything. And with the discovery laws and everything else, it just seems that there's a lot of information that now is being given to the defense attorney, which obviously could be given to the perpetrator. And it's just a lot of stuff that I don't really feel is necessary right now. It's not important. I understand, interactions and things like that. Like you said earlier, the body worn camera is on the front, right? What if you're ambushed from the side? What if you have to literally shoot while you're sitting in your RMP? That's not even recorded, right? All they're going to see you is reaching across. So I mean, I don't know. I think they've gone a little bit overboard with everything and anything that has happened. And I always say, what does the department do best? It covers their own ass. So they just look for any type of liability, anything where it's not going to happen, then they have it on video, or they have something on video that they can refute something else or minimize the lawsuit. So I just think there's a lot to it, And it also takes away from time on patrol, right? Tagging and bagging and all the other crap that they got to put together to get that thing together. It's just a lot of work, right? It just adds on to it. And one last thought. Also, with the unions involved in this, because it added a lot more work to it. And are officers getting compensated?
Yeah.
Are they allowing an hour at the end of their tour? What's going on with that, right?
They were given 2.5%. It was given 2.5% as a I don't want to call it a stipend, but they were given 2.5% increases because it was above their prior collective bargaining agreement. So it was spoken about, and it was worked out with the unions, and I think that was part of the delay from 2013 until it started going out in 2017. Was they had to somehow compensate the cops, right? Then the bosses got on board, because now there's a lot of oversight. Bosses have to wear them. Right?
Did the bosses get compensated?
Yeah.
The LBA, the SBA, and the CEA?
Yes, yeah. We were the CEA. We were the last ones, because there's all different layers, and everybody that they started wearing them. The captains and above were the last to start wearing them. But, sergeants had to wear them, lieutenants had to wear them, so they had to be compensated also. And there's a lot in there that we're talking about, and I don't want people to think that we're passing uniform differential. Patrick's calling it, okay, of 2.5% is what they got. And I believe Eric on a podcast once said that that comes out to about $50 a check pre-taxed, for an average cop.
Yeah.
But there's a lot, and Captain and Coke 70 made a comment earlier. Is it recording while I'm in the RMP with my partner? So that's a question that we also have. So when you first power on your body worn camera, it goes into what's called the buffering mode. You had mentioned it already, that the V-View cameras were buffering for 30 seconds. What a buffering is, for those who aren't familiar, and for those who are off the job and those who are non-NYPD, the buffering is a continuous loop. So it's continuously recording with no audio, and every 30 seconds it rewrites over itself. And the Axon cameras are looping over every minute. And there's an NYPD Body Worn Camera impact and use policy statement that was put out. And it says, once powered on, body worn cameras continuously record, rewriting over captured video. I'm repeating myself here. Intervals on V-View cameras and 1 minute intervals for on cameras, unless the record switch is activated. This process, commonly known as buffering. When an officer activates the record switch, the preceding 30 seconds of video is automatically saved. That 30 seconds or 1 minute of recorded video will have no audio. So what does that mean? That means, like I said, it's constantly buffering. It's constantly recording. So with the NYPD, they're saying in their policy statement that that's all they're doing. So now it's been brought up and questioned in the past. Well, is it possible if it's recording for 30 seconds, or if it's recording for a minute and it's supposedly rewriting over itself, then why can't it record for 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours? It's going to the cloud, right? So Snake Plissken is asking here, can they access your camera? They can access your camera whenever they want for live feeds, whenever they want, as long as it's on. I've seen it. That depends. It depends on the type of camera. It depends on the different administrative functions that have been activated. But for right this second, what we're going to talk about is this buffering. And I'm going to bring up a video. I'm going to give John and Eric a little shout out. Bring up the young John and Eric from 2 years ago. This was from March 30th of 2023 on the Finest Unfiltered podcast, where Eric and John were talking about body worn cameras and their perspective on body worn cameras and its effect with policing in the NYPD. So if we could bring up that video. It's basically, they're talking about their perspective. And again, this is the executive perspective. So we're giving it to you from a little different angle and from a little bit more sometimes insightful because of our access to higher privileges in the system. Here's the video.
Nightmare. It could hurt you in a million different ways. And my other thing, and I don't know this to be true, but I mean, if it could go back 30 seconds and if it could go back a minute, I don't believe that it can't go back for 8 hours. I'm not buying. I just don't believe it. I would like to see the full disclosure on how the camera operates. I don't believe that we would ever issued that at all. So it could be, I could be 100% wrong on that, but I don't trust it. How does it go back a minute? How does it go back a minute and it can't go back the entire time?
Okay, so shout out to John McCary 2 years ago, March 30th, 2023, made that statement. He's reiterated that statement on future podcasts when body worn camera topics have come up and they've discussed these things. So I did a little research, and John had mentioned also that he believed that he read on the Axon website that there is an ability. So it's called video recall. So directly from the Axon website, despite the many features through Axon's signal technology designed to ensure footage is captured, there may be a scenario in which transparency is needed for an incident that wasn't recorded. Let's say a critical incident occurred and the officer forgot to activate the camera, but Axon's signal wireless automatic activation wasn't set up. How can stakeholders see how the incident unfolded and ensure the right visibility into the events? Video recall is designed as a last failsafe for missed evidence. With the video recall feature, body-worn camera footage can be recovered from up to 18 hours prior, helping surface the needed body-worn camera footage for transparency and communication with the community. So with that depends on a couple of things. It depends on, number one, the model of body-worn camera that you have, and number two, the permissions given by the administrator. The administrator is your agency. So right there in black and white, the availability is there to go back 18 hours. The NYPD's policy states it only goes back for 1 minute. And it also states in there, other models can go back 24 hours. Now, when it goes back into this video recall mode, there's no audio and it's a lower quality video. So it's going to be a little bit grainier and it's going to be without volume, just like the buffering of the 1 minute. So, John, you're 100% right. The capability is there. Now, whether the NYPD has activated that function, that's a question I believe the union should be asking. They should be getting something in some type of legal writings that isn't the case to protect their members. So the capability is absolutely there. What do you think about that?
Well, I know, since I have a son in Texas in law enforcement, I can tell you 100% that they have the capability. Obviously, you said through the administrator, but they do have the capability of literally watching as a supervisor from the officer's body-worn camera. So what it has to be was what I've been told, that the body-worn camera has to be not so much, it has to be on, right? It can't be in the sleep mode. If it's in a sleep mode, there's no accessibility for a supervisor to go into it. But as we all know, we rarely put it in the sleep mode. I think they don't put it in the sleep mode unless they're going, to the bathroom, or they're going to, going to have meal or whatever, where they can do that. So when the body worn camera's on, they said if they're activated at a job, their supervisor can actually see where they are, and they'll hear a beep on their body worn camera. The light will turn purple, and then on the top, not on the actual, the disc, the red disc continues, but on the top where they view down, they'll see a purple, and they'll know that their supervisor now is actually monitoring their body worn camera. So then everybody in that area would know that the supervisor's on. I know that they'll give the thumbs up. Hey, the boss is watching or whatever. But I guess there's also the capability, if the body worn camera's on, they can go back 12 hours. And there was an example where one of the police officers was basically ambushed. I believe it was a domestic. The person came out before the officer could even get out of his car. Didn't activate the body worn camera, was shot in the arm. Luckily, he's okay. He's fine. Survived the gunshot wound, thank God, and got out and engaged. And they didn't have that now on body worn camera, but they were able to go back and extract it from the camera, and they got the full footage of everything that transpired. So yeah, John was 100% right. It is done. It can be done, but do we know if the NYPD is doing it? I'm gonna think if they want to, they will. And are they gonna tell you? That's a whole nother question. All right, that's a whole nother question. I mean, what was happening with the khaki pants, Ron? What was going on with that?
Oh, that was the next thing. It's number one, you have to have a different model in order to activate live and to view from live, like your son's agency. They have the model that you can remotely activate it and watch live coverage. Oh, an article came out in the city, and it was about just that. It was about the khaki pants, as we call them, right? The CRT. And it was talking about, secrecy by the mayor. And I'll read in part of the article. Another instance of secrecy involving body-worn cameras. Early in 2023, the team, being the CRT, had purchased new models that allowed users to send live feeds to select individuals, including the mayor. But unit leaders had not informed others at the NYPD, according to an official's notes from the time. For weeks, videos from the new cameras were not stored in the NYPD's main database for footage, rendering it invisible for the department lawyers responsible for sharing evidence in criminal and civil cases. Footage wasn't being produced for discovery, recalled one former department executive. We lost our minds. Jerome Greco, head of the Digital Forensics and Legal Aid Society, said failing to turn over the footage could get cases dismissed. It could have significant consequences, and frankly, it should. It was after the body-worn cameras issued that Pontillo, and they're speaking about former chief of
Risk
Management Bureau, correct, Matt Pontillo, wrote an audit of the CRT, which flagged the team's aggressive policies. Adams' first police commissioner, Keyshawn Sewell, ordered commanders to gather and discuss it, but the conversation didn't go far. After meeting with the mayor that same day, Sewell resigned with no explanation. She did not respond for requests for comment for this story, but a former official close to her said she had grown tired of being undermined by Adams and his deputies. I don't think Sewell's resignation I don't think Sewell resigned because of CRT, the former official said, but it was another thing on the list. So here they are running around with impunity, has been spoken about many times on the Finest Unfiltered broadcast at 0805 with John McCary and Eric Dim. They've chronicled the CRT many, many times. They've been spoken about. Chief Pontillo, who I've worked with throughout the years, is a man of great integrity. It was his job as the chief of risk management to basically ensure the constitutionality of the stops. That's one of the main things that his unit was doing. They're reviewing body-worn cameras, reviewing stop reports, force reports, things like that. We had these risk meetings where we would go over these things. We would go over CCRBs, we would go over force reports, we would go over the body-worn camera compliance, as well as videos themselves. So there was so much talk about the CRT that they did an audit of the CRT's body-worn camera footage. That's when they found out about these cameras that nobody else in the police department has, that nobody else in the upper echelon or risk management bureau or the body-worn camera unit knew about. And they had those models where they could be viewed live remotely, and allegedly the mayor had access and was using it to watch what was going on out in the field. Now, the unit heads purchased these body-worn cameras. Who are the unit heads of the CRT? Who's behind the CRT, right? Now the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, Kaz Daughtry, and now the Chief of Department, John Schell. And I don't like to speak critically of people, but if they had knowledge of this, and I can't see how they didn't, and they allowed this, I don't understand. I don't understand how you could go out and buy special body-worn cameras just for your unit, and nothing was being memorialized. So there again, you have a unit running around with impunity.
I think it's crazy. So the other thing is, did they in fact, actually, could the downloads, could updates, could we even do the cameras that we have now? Could those things be added on later on? I don't know. But I mean, it's crazy that they would do that. And it was also that they could sit in, City Hall and sit around and watch these guys do their work, and maybe take some of those videos and put them out on the newspaper and broadcast how great these units are doing. So I mean, I just think it's crazy. Just being able as a supervisor to activate somebody's camera and watch them. I mean, hey, if the officers agree and they understand it, there are some advantages to it, because if something's going bad, if an officer doesn't answer his radio and Central's trying to get him, Central's the dispatcher, so Central's trying to get them and they don't answer, they can cue in on the body-worn camera and see, does this person need help? Is this person down? And what's going on? So there are some advantages to it. If the person can't get onto his radio at the time but needs help, I mean, there are some advantages to it. Well, just to go back to Texas, a crazy thing I was told, that if you have your body-worn camera on and just in the regular not the sleep mode, but just ready to be activated, so somebody puts their turret lights on, any RMP, radio motor patrol car, right, police car, puts the lights on, it automatically activates your. Now I could just see the NYPD guys, right? Imagine this: you're coming out of your precinct, they're messing with you, and they put the lights on, so everybody's body-worn cameras go on, doing the crazy things. But also, when they open the back door of the RMP, that will activate their body-worn camera. I guess if they're putting a prisoner in the back of the car, that's activated. And also, when the taser's on and they bring the taser up to eye level, that will also automatically activate. So these are all things that can be done. And I'm sure New York City has the capability. And I mean, we know Kaz and his guys had that, but it kind of went in a different direction. I think Chief Pontillo was a great guy, a smart guy, had a lot of knowledge, and really cared to put the direction of the NYPD and make sure they followed the law, right? So that everything was okay. That was the whole idea of it. And I think they went off on their own. They were cowboys on their own and doing it for the mayor. I just don't think it was not the right thing to do. And if I was the cop that they told me that I had that body-worn camera, I'd be a little upset that that I'm the guinea pig here. It's not even an authorized pilot program, right? So I mean, it's just, to me, it's just it smells, and it doesn't smell good.
Yeah, there's all different settings. There's also a setting that remotely turns on your body worn camera when Central assigns you a job. That's another one of the settings I read about on the website. So just like when you go into the system and you pull up a job, it tells you tells you right in the job, the officers who are responding, the RMP, all the information is right there in the iCAD and in the job. So that is also linked up in some agencies. So it all depends on the model number, the amount of money they're going to spend, and the technology that they want to put in place. So there's a whole bunch of different things. Snake Plissken is saying that the new Taser 7s will activate all axons with 4s within a certain distance. They haven't gotten crazy, though, to do it upon turn light activations. I've heard of other agencies do the same with guns drawn. Yes, it is true. That is one of the settings that could be set. And I did read in the article. I read a couple of different articles, and one of the things that I read about, and so before we get into the effects it has or hasn't had with the NYPD a little deeper, as opposed to what it was touted to do, there's a very controversial topic that comes up, and the PERF, which is the Police Executive Research Forum, it's comprised of police executives throughout the whole country, police chiefs and police commissioners and leaders from throughout the whole country are on this forum, and they get together at different symposiums and go over different topics. And one of the things they did back in 2014 was they got together about body worn cameras because they were starting to come out. And one of the topics that was discussed is whether or not they should allow policy of each individual agency varies. That's another one of the things. There's no nationwide policy or no nationwide practice on this, and PERF was looking at that, and they looked at, should officers have the right to view their body-worn cameras prior to filling out their reports, testifying in court, whether they should be able to look at their body-worn camera of an incident prior to being questioned about an incident in an official department investigation, like we call what's called loosely we call it a GO-15, because it used to be General Order 15. Now it's a patrol guide procedure. But before they do. Now, the policy of the NYPD, before everybody starts asking, is yes, you are allowed to view your body-worn camera prior to any of those things. But it's a big controversy, and there's reasons why a lot of people are against it, a lot of people are for it. How do you feel about it, Rob?
Well, I feel especially, well, first of all, for a court case or anything else, I think you should definitely be able to look at it, right? You have your memo book, or your memo, it's in the iPad now or whatever. You have that all, you have whatever you put in there. So that can be used in a testimony, right? You want to recall what happened, Your Honor, can I refer to my memo book at this time? And yes, you can. So I don't see there any reason why you wouldn't be able to look at that video prior to your testimony, because it was going to refresh your memory. That's what the whole idea is, to refresh your memory, so you give the whole story. For a GO-15, I believe 150,000% that the officer should be allowed to review the body-worn camera prior to them being asked questions. Why? Because I don't trust the NYPD. I don't trust some of the investigators, because if they're going to try to get you for a misleading statement, a false statement, they're going to say, you're contradicting what's on the body-worn camera now. You said you didn't see it, and your body-worn camera, obviously you did see it. So I totally 100% agree. If they really want a full investigation and they want to be able to do it correctly, they need to let the officer review it and then give the testimony in the hearing, the GO-15 hearing, and give it the way that they see it, that their memory has been refreshed, and now that they remember these things. Because you know what? Everybody's memory is not as great as some people. I knew there was one person that taught one of the police training classes. I think his name was Walsh, and he had like a photographic memory. Like he would read the patrol guide off the top of his head. Like he would go, you would have the patrol guide in front of you. He'd go down section, section, section. He's got a photographic memory, but I don't think a majority of us do, right? You have to refresh your memory. I don't want to look at video. I want to be able to give the right testimony. And I think it's only fair and accurate to the officer, right? Because how many other jobs did the officer go to that day? How many jobs has he gone since then? It's just, I believe 150,000% that the officer should definitely be able to review that body worn camera.
Okay, so I'll give you the counter argument that's out there. And I'll tell you that back in 2014, when body worn cameras were just being rolled out throughout the nation, that 86% of agencies agreed with you and said that the officers should have the ability to view their body worn camera footage from an incident. And they were mostly talking about high profile police involved incidents where there was a firearms discharge, abuse, use of force by the officers, where there were injuries and things like that. Those types of investigations. And that was the general consensus, that they absolutely should. Now that we're 10 years later, they've done another report. They've done a follow-up report that they've done a follow-up report where they have gone down to 50 some odd percent of departments have policies now that allow for officers to look at their body worn camera prior to these investigative interviews. They want what's called a prospective interview first, because it's very important to remember that the officer's perspective that they had at the time of the encounter is the most important piece of the puzzle. What did the officer perceive? What threats did he or she perceive? What was that officer thinking at the time of the incident? What did they see? They may not have seen what the body worn camera has seen. They may have been looking in a different direction. They may have heard something that may not be caught on the body worn camera, or seen something, and in their professional opinion, in their perspective, they felt some type of threat that they reacted to. And then if they watched the body worn camera and what they perceived as a threat is not shown on that body worn camera, it alters their perception of the event, and their testimony is not going to be the same, because now they're looking from the lens of a body worn camera. They see something. They may have been questioning their decisions prior to the testimony and prior to seeing the body worn camera. So there's your confliction of whether the human brain works differently. You can not change the view of the camera. However, you can change the view of the human brain by introducing outside sources, such as now the body worn camera or body worn cameras of others at the event. So that's the argument that's been put forth, and what these other agencies are doing. And again, like I opened up in the beginning, I believe that what other agencies around the country are doing may not be the same, and body worn camera policies and procedures may not be being treated the same in the NYPD. I do believe, and you touched on it before, that the NYPD's use of body worn camera has leaned more punitive than it should. Body worn cameras are supposed to be used for training purposes more than disciplinary purposes, right? We talk about Monday morning quarterbacking, right? And Monday morning quarterbacking isn't a bad thing, right? Because what are you doing when you're Monday morning quarterbacking, right? You're looking at an event, and there's a quote from Chuck Wexler, who's the executive director of PERF, right? And he said on Monday morning quarterbacking isn't about blaming individual officers, but about having conversations to understand what happened in the past incidents so that we can prevent the next one. It's the same thing, right? About history. If you don't study history, it tends to repeat itself. Again, I think I got a little sidetracked there with that one, but on the point of watching the body-worn camera prior to making a perspective statement, which then the other agencies allow you to watch your camera. They give you a certain amount of time to watch your camera and now come in and you can update your statement after viewing your camera. But the whole point is they want to get that perspective view from you and that perspective statement from you. I'm going to, before you even say it, I'm going to agree with you that unfortunately, in the atmosphere that we work and live in today, that those conflictions from a perspective view to a body-worn camera view, which doesn't change, is different. And because the officer perceived something and perceived a certain threat or perceived a situation in a certain way that isn't shown to a person that wasn't there just because they're watching the camera, they are more than likely going to be looked at in a negative light, that they gave misleading statements in their first perspective statement as opposed to a statement post watching their camera. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there that scares me, because I don't think that the officers get enough credit for their perspective and, you know, what they think was reasonable at the time. So, Gad, before we get into the legalese, I'll give you time to rebut me.
Well, I think that by reviewing the body-worn camera and then letting the officer testify, a good investigator can bring out what the perception of that officer was. He can go around. This is what your body-worn camera saw. You know, what else did it see? How were you feeling? Were you scared? Were you nervous at that point? Was the hair on the back of your neck rising? You know, what actions did you take when you first saw that person come into view? I mean, these are all questions that a good investigator will bring out. And I'm still under the opinion that that officer should be able to review that body-worn camera prior. I think it makes a lot more sense to me. I'm not saying that it's going to take away his opinion or change the concept of the whole operation, but it at least gives them a little bit more insight as to what happens. It's going to refresh their memory. They can say, well, my body-worn camera was looking towards the front of the bodega, but onto my left, I remember seeing the man with the gun coming across the street. And then I turned, and then that's where my body-worn camera picked up that individual with the gun in his hand. So I just think that a good investigator is gonna, whether it's from the FID, right, the Firearms Investigation Division, IAB, Internal Affairs Bureau, inspections, a good investigator is going to pull that out. And what I would also say, if you have a good delegate like Patrick Donahue, he's gonna be able to pull that out too. All right, so when they want to hold up on the GO and say, hold on, he's telling you what happened, he saw on the video. Now let the officer tell you what his perception was, what he saw.
Right.
So I think it all depends upon the investigator. And I do not trust some of the investigative units. If they're looking to get you and they don't show you to what the video did or showed, that they're going to look to say, well, now, like I said earlier, misleading or false statement. So I mean, it has a little bit of controversy right there.
Oh, it's absolutely a controversial topic, and it's one of the, according to the report, it was the most controversial conversation that all of these executives had throughout the entire country. Again, I believe other departments treat their offices and give their offices a little more leeway.
Definitely.
That they give them a little more respect in their perspective. But again, when you get down to the psychology of it, you can alter your thinking, you can alter your memory, actually, by watching this body-worn camera. So to get the perspective interview memorialized of what you were thinking, what you were feeling at the time, I feel is important. Because once you watch that body-worn camera, your mind could play tricks on you and you could remember things differently. You can actually, it can actually alter your memory. And in that, now that you're watching this over again and you're seeing it from a different perspective of the body-worn camera, you're not in the moment anymore. Your adrenaline is not running through your body and your heart's not going 190 beats per minute. Your tunnel vision is not there any longer, because when you're engaged in something that critical, a critical incident, you become tunnel vision sometimes. The body works in mysterious ways. So it's been shown that by watching these body-worn cameras, that your perception could actually alter. That's what I'm saying. It could actually alter your perception, and you may not be able to articulate properly the state of mind that you were in at the time, because now you've had time to decompress, you've had time to come down, and you've had time to rethink. And when you're rethinking things in your own mind, which we all have done, you're running through the thing, what could I have done differently? Especially if you've gotten involved in something heavy. Could I have done something differently? What did this person do? Then I responded and I reacted to this and I did this and I did that. You're running that through your own mind from your perspective. Once you introduce the body-worn camera, you can physically alter your perception and recollection of an incident. So I think it is important to memorialize that. But I agree with you that they will, unfortunately, the woke DAs, the certain investigative units on the NYPD will go after you for making false statements because your body-worn camera shows something different than you testified to a half an hour ago. I agree with you. I agree with you. And I'm not saying before you go to testify in court that you shouldn't refresh your memory and look at it and look at the body-worn camera and look at all the other evidence that everybody else is going to be looking at, because you don't want to get caught off guard. But there is a lot to be said about that perception. And I was going to bring it up a little later when we were talking about CCRBs, but I'll bring up Graham versus Connor right now. Right? Graham versus Connor is a Supreme Court case. And what is that? That talks about the use of force, right? The reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, rather than with the 20/20 vision of hindsight. And what you get from watching your body-worn camera is a 2020 vision of hindsight, because now you're looking back at something. You're not talking about your perspective, your reasonableness of the incident that you were in at the time, the things you were going through, right? And what describes reasonableness? Another Supreme Court case, right? Barnes v. Felix, right? It challenges the moment of threat doctrine, with the court considering whether to apply totality of the circumstances approach to evaluate the police use of force. Factors considered in determining reasonableness: the severity of the crime, the imminence of threat, right? Whether the suspect posed an imminent threat to that officer or others, resistance or flight, the officer's perspective. The court considers the situation from the perspective of the reasonable officer on the scene, recognizing that they must make quick decisions in dynamic situations. Time constraints. Officers have to make split-second decisions under pressure, and the court acknowledges this. Well, the Supreme Court does. I don't know about New York State courts. And incomplete information. Officers may not have all the facts at their disposal during the incident, and the court recognizes this. Now, again, these are Supreme Court cases that cover officers' reasonableness. I don't believe for a moment that that these principles are being applied properly in the courts in New York City. But what I'm also saying now, that I brought this up now instead of during our CCRB portion, is that the court talks about that reasonableness and the mental state of the officer at the time of the incident, and not 2020 hindsight. So now we could talk about how you need to get and memorialize that, how my perspective was, what I was feeling in the moment, where my head was at, what I was thinking, what I saw. What I saw may not be physically what's on camera. I may have saw a shadow. I may have saw something else that's not being picked up by the camera's angle at my chest level, right? And the reasonableness of my decision to do whatever I did at the time has to be taken into consideration. And once I view that camera, I now have 2020 hindsight, because I'm looking back at it. And now I can reconsider what I did by looking at it from a different perspective, from the perspective of being behind a computer. So that's my point, and that's my argument, my perspective on allowing officers to do it. Now, my end all is going to be that I believe they should, unfortunately, get to look at it, irregardless of how it's going to change their perspective, because I don't think that they're going to get a fair shake if they describe their perspective and their perspective doesn't match up to their camera footage.
I personally think you're living in a fantasy world. If you think that's fine and that's okay, but we're within the NYPD. You're within 5 district attorneys that will put you in jail faster than they can indict an apple, which they could do in 15, 20 seconds. And I just think that the body worn camera gives it one view. It doesn't give you 360, right? It doesn't give you your full perspective. And then I think that an officer can I have enough faith and trust in the officers in the NYPD that they would be able to articulate the 360 view that camera doesn't give. I just feel that camera gives them that precision on what was happening right in front of them. It may be able to refresh their memory, make them recall things that they might not have recalled prior to them taking action. But the 360 view, that's what that officer has. And that's going to come out when that questioning comes out after their critical incident. They're calm, they're down, relaxed, that they can articulate then exactly what their feeling was. I don't think the body worn camera, if the body worn camera was like a Google camera on the top of my head and gave me a 360 view, then I would totally agree with you. But I can't agree with you. I have enough faith in the police officers in the NYPD that they can articulate it, and I do not have enough faith in the department and the 5 district attorneys which we serve, that they will not believe that there's some nefarious thing going on and they're going to try to get the officers. I love what Amazing Ant and Mike Freed spoke about earlier, the OODA loop. I haven't heard that in a long time. You know, that's where you the mindset of the other person, and you break their concentration. Sometimes it was just, you know, throwing something at them, and it would distract them, right? So a guy's there with a gun, and he's ready to shoot at you, but you know, you could throw something or whatever. Not that you want to shoot him, but you throw something. It's just I saw that in the comments, and it was so good. Amazing, and they brought it up with Mike Freed also. And one other comment, I love what Hunter said earlier with the camera in front of the police car. Some of them have that camera, and I think he's from another agency, but he would pull NYPD officers out, and all he would see would be the cop get out with his shield. Hey, I'm on the job. I'm on the job. I'm on the job. So it's a crazy thing, but
yeah, body worn cameras catch a lot of crazy stuff too. But you know,
yeah.
On this note, I just think that the perception and what you were thinking at the time is so important, and that's what the law is based on. But I agree. I don't have faith that you're getting a good fair shake, that you can give in the NYPD a perspective analysis, a perspective statement of what you were feeling and how you reacted to what you saw, what you felt, what your perception of what threats were. And then look at your body worn camera from a 2020 hindsight view and make a statement from that, because it may differ. And again, it's the human nature, it's the human brain that could change the officer's perception. And listen, I know where it is. I know where it is. But I understand that. But what I'm saying is, it's not even that. You could be looking at the same exact thing. You could be looking straight ahead. The threat could be straight ahead in front of you. And the camera's looking straight ahead in front of you, picking up almost the same exact view as you. I'm not saying that it has to be an off-camera view or a clouded view or an obstructed view or whatever the case may be. The camera could have almost saying the same view as you, but the camera doesn't have your perception. And what was said in the study by the psychologist is that, again, you can't change the perspective of the camera, but you can change the perspective of the human mind. So giving your perspective without being, I don't want to say use the word tainted, but without the view of a 2020 hindsight looking at the camera, it could change your perspective on how you're going to answer questions. That's my point on that. So we're almost an hour and a half into it. Let's hit the like, the subscribe. Let's get some followers going. Let's get the Executive Perspective podcast going. Congratulations to the Finest Unfiltered, was number 11 out of the top million police podcasts, or top 1,000 police podcasts. I saw that today, so congratulations to them. We're part of the New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered network. We're, like I said, we're an hour and 28 minutes into this, and we have a bunch of stuff that we wanted to go over. So I think let's jump right into the part that I think a lot of the offices, a lot of people in the comments, a lot of people that we're reaching out and speaking about are talking about. Now, it was touted as one of the things that it was going to lower complaints against the officers. And I believe when they first came out, I do believe that it absolutely did. And I do believe that the statistics do show a decline in abuse of authority complaints. So what has happened since, though? What has happened since? Well, there's a lot has happened since. A lot has happened since in society, in criminal justice reform, in the way that we police. I don't believe that body-worn cameras, no matter what they were touted to be, were ever going to be any type of cure-all for policing in America. I believe it does increase transparency because you have the ability to see things. I believe that the police have an obligation to share body-worn camera footage, both good and bad, not just show the good stuff that the cops are doing every day out there, which I believe they should be doing. But you also, in those instances, you have to show when officers make mistakes. So there's two sides to that coin, right? But when it comes to complaints against officers, originally, CCRB went down, and then all of a sudden, you see a rise. And if I could find it, the CCRB numbers, there you go, thank you, went up from 2021 to 2024. This is from the CCRB's 2024 annual report. Got up 150%. You have 5333 complaints of abuse of authority in 2021. Fast forward to 2024, you have 15,547. It's 61% of all CCRB complaints. So body-worn cameras obviously are not reducing the use of force complaints against officers. Now, if you look at what use of force complaints are, there are almost 90. It's that column. If you're looking at your screen, it's the column on the right. Abuse of authority, allegations. And look at that list. There's almost 90 subcategories of what they could charge you with abuse of authority. Now, I don't know how many of those have been added. I don't know how many of those actual increases have been there. But I know one of them is misuse. I think it's the number 3 down, is misuse of body-worn camera. It's improper use of body-worn camera is abuse of authority. And there were 1,216 last year. In 2023, it went down a little bit to 918. But they could find, and that's the problem with CCRB, is they could find anything they want and call whatever they want, improper use of body-worn camera, because they have access to the department guides. And if you violate one little thing in that guideline, then they can hit you with that charge. And yeah, TC, COVID lockdowns did attribute to the low numbers in 20 and 21. So it's hard to gauge, since in August of 2019 is when the full rollout was out there. But it is, troubling. What are your thoughts on that part of it?
I think maybe in the beginning, people were a little nervous about somebody, recording them, a police officer recording them. Maybe the cops were a little nervous about what's going to happen if I have my body-worn camera activated and I say something wrong, or am I going to get hammered, or am I going to get retraining? What's going to happen? And until they get used to something, then maybe they come around with it. I think one of the big problems is that when somebody makes a false allegation and it's found on the body worn camera, nobody's ever charged with 240-50 falsifying an incident in the third degree. That's something that they don't do, right? Which I think they should, because that would give credibility to the officer, knows that if something is, somebody makes a false complaint to CCRB, that they signs just like you sign that old, falsifying or in person, whatever, you would sign, and you would verify that, in fact, you could be committing perjury, right? That's what the old thing with you. I'm signing this on any false statement therein is perjury. All right, well, let's do that or filing a false report. Why aren't we prosecuting these people that make these false reports? The false report that's going to be stuck on my 50A for the rest of my life. Okay. It's just, that's what I think. If there's no repercussions to making a BS report, then if the officer pissed me off, whether he was or she was wrong or right, I'm going to make a CCRB. You know what? It's going to be, I won. Even if the complaint is unsubstantiated or even exonerated, I got that guy. He's on his 50A for the rest of his life. Bam, I got him. I'm, as the victim, I won. The cop lost, no matter what. So I think either they should start taking it, if they're going to take the cop serious, and we're going to talk about Tish, with discipline. If they're going to take the cop serious, then let's take the complainant serious too, and make them and put their feet to the fire also. And I bet you, if you did that, you would then see a reduction in complaints, because then people would be cautious about making false complaints and ruining some cop's career because of these BS complaints, and not only ruining their career in the NYPD, but ruining their career when they get out of the NYPD. Because as soon as you send a resume into somebody and says NYPD for 35 years, they're going to Google your name, and that 50A is going to come up. And then they're going to see all these complaints. And what does a regular civilian, what does a head of a corporate company see? This guy's problematic. Just look at all these complaints this girl got. So let's put people's feet to the fire and start doing things right. If we're going to hold the cops accountable, let's hold the people that make the false reports accountable.
I agree with you 100%. And I do agree that complaints did go down in the beginning, that false allegations were being made. And once the body worn camera was there, I think it worked two ways. I think officers were minding their P's and Q's a little bit more when they were out there, knowing that they were on camera. So I think that helped to reduce complaints, because officers were being more compliant, being a little more professional while they were out there. I think that you should be prosecuted if you're making a false allegation that is a blatant false allegation. If we use force and someone makes a false allegation against you, again, is that making a false report? The guidelines might show that we had the right to use force, and as we've said many times in many different avenues, that police work isn't always pretty. And police work on cell phones, like somebody said before, you get a 30-second clip, and that's what they're running off of. The fact that CCRB can make a complaint against an officer without even a complainant, if they see one of these videos on TikTok or wherever, then it doesn't matter. But the problem being also is that CCRB entertains so many of these complaints, and it doesn't matter if you work within department guidelines. So Arva Rice, who's the previous head of the CCRB, she recently stepped down, but she's the prior CCRB chair. And she was testifying in front of the city council. And we have a video of her testimony, and it's about a 3-minute video. I want to ask you to please be patient, watch the whole interaction between her and Brad Lander. I think it was Brad Lander. And this interaction going back and forth touches on a lot of what we just spoke about today. And it says so much. Take a listen.
We had some hearings in the last council. After
Robert Holden, sorry.
And I just remember when the police did testify, I asked Commissioner Shea at the time, how many police officers were hurt during the riot? He said nearly 400. Also, we had 350 police cars that were damaged. 15 were set afire, and about $1.1 million damage. Do you take into consideration, and I've been in a riot before, so I understand what it's like, where people are coming at you from different directions and things are being thrown, and it's just mayhem. And how people react is very different when it's like a free-for-all, essentially. So with 2,000 arrests, in some of those riots and some of the video that I've seen, and you have access to video, do you kind of judge where the situation is out of control and human beings act differently, both on both sides, that there are situations where self-preservation kicks in? Do you take that into consideration in your agency?
Let me answer that first, and I'll have John respond. First of all, as members of the CCRB, as I mentioned already before, there's 15 members, 5 that are appointed by the mayor, 5 by this body itself, 3 that are designated by the police commissioner, 1 appointed by the public advocate, and 1 that's jointly approved by the chair. We do not make judgments. We have a team of investigators who are trained, who look at body-worn camera footage, who do interviews, who do very extensive work, and it's presented to us. And based on the police patrol guide, there's a recommendation that's made to us about whether the case is substantiated, and then we vote as a panel on that. It is something that is presented and vetted to us. It is not based on our personal opinions, and so that's not what we bring into this case. So we look at it as based on how police officers are interacting with the community, and if there is abuse, if there is excessive use of force, if there's offensive language, or there's other issues that are at play. That is what we're making our recommendation on. So it's not based on a given situation, but by the evidence that's presented.
So it's not based on if I'm getting bricks thrown at me or fire bombs thrown at me, and there's no situation where self-preservation kicks in. It's just sort of, don't curse at me, or don't speak to me disrespectfully. And I'm trying to get the situation that you have to take in everything that's going on, not just an isolated incident. So, like, what was the situation at the time? Were the police under attack? Were cars being burned? Was property being damaged? This all has to be taken into consideration. That's all I'm saying.
And she finishes that by saying, can we get that back up, Jack, and let it run right to the very end?
Complaint review board. So what we are looking at is when a civilian interacts with the police department and they feel as if their rights were. It is about our work is about the civilian. I just want to underscore that.
So their work is about the civilian, and if the civilian feels like their rights were violated. So it doesn't matter if their rights were in fact violated. It doesn't matter the totality of the circumstances. If people are throwing bricks and firebombs and burning your RMPs behind you, it doesn't matter if they were justified by the patrol guide. They still find you substantiated because of the perception of the civilian. She said it right out of her own mouth. It's about what the civilian feels if they feel like their rights were violated. If they feel like their rights were violated. A lot of them don't even know exactly what their rights are. And if the police officer acts within department guidelines, they could still be found guilty by CCRB, by found substantiated. And then the department doesn't allow them to bring forth any charges. And she said it in a different city council meeting that they can't bring forth any charges because they actually didn't violate any department guidelines or laws. But they still substantiate the complaint because the civilian felt violated.
It's just total lunacy. I mean, how do you do that? It's just, you're just looking she's looking to protect her job at the time. That's all that was. You can't, the totality of how somebody feels. Oh, poor baby. You know what? How does a cop feel? All right. How does a cop feel when he's standing in front of a precinct and some guy's trying to shove a cookie down his throat? How about that? There's just no concern for the police officer, and it's just disheartening to hear somebody of that that position to think that they could just arbitrarily take anything that person says verbatim, and then not only that, but I'm going to say, they have their feelings are hurt, so that's more important than whether or not it went down. Oh, poor baby. The cop's guilty. I mean, it's pure lunacy. I don't know. I can't explain any further. It's pure stupidity.
Listen, again, this is the point with the body worn cameras is they're watching body worn camera footage without the perspective of any law enforcement background. Their investigators are not law enforcement investigators. Their investigators are people that they're grabbing from out of state, out of college, with no life experience. And these are the investigators that are looking at body worn camera. They're looking at body worn camera. They're slowing it down frame by frame to analyze a situation that you had to deal with in real time, And from your reasonableness as a police officer, trained police officer, what you perceived to be a threat or the appropriate use of force, and that which is justified by the law and is justified by the NYPD patrol guide, which is more stringent than the law, yet they still find fault from body-worn camera footage and viewing it from a perspective of who? The civilian. Not taking into consideration the officer's training, not taking into, it's not. And I didn't want to acknowledge RH because of the comments. It's called an investigation, correct. But it's not called due process. You're supposed to get due process in a proper investigation, as you put it. You're supposed to get due process. And police officers are allowed due process as much as civilians are allowed due process under the law and under the Constitution. And what we're saying here is that, unfortunately, the body-worn cameras, I think that's my perspective at least, and I believe Rob agrees, that it's our perspective as executives that the officers are not getting due process and that the body-worn camera footage is being used against them because people that don't have a law enforcement background or the perspective at all, and they're not even taking the perspective of the law enforcement officer or the law or the patrol guide into consideration. It's a one-sided investigation. It's not a true and honest investigation.
Snake Plissken's got me in the Matrix, but actually I'm not. I'm actually in my my stepson Aiden's bachelor pad. So that's why obviously the bachelor's, there's no paint around it. So it didn't do a total whiteout. It's actually the wall right there. But if somebody shoots at me, maybe I'll take a Matrix way about it. But so just like them, that CCRB using a body-worn camera against you that's what I want to. I don't want to jump back to the old one, but I'll tell you That's why I want the officers to be able to review their body worn camera, because they're going to use that body worn camera against you, and unless you have a defense. But that's jumping back a little bit. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's bad that it's just, I don't know. It's just CCRBs. It seems like they're fishing, right? So it's, if the body worn camera exonerates the cop, and they did the investigation. Help! I'm being held hostage.
It's your proof of life video.
I just hope I don't get swatted now. Please don't say I'm being held hostage. That if they're using that information, the CCRB is using that information, that they're still not giving the cop the benefit of the doubt when they can prove it, because then they're going to go on the feeling side. It's just craziness. I don't know.
And I'm gonna. You can bring up RH's last comment also, that we're not preaching the same thing, less accountability for cops, because I'm all about accountability for cops. Because I'm not talking about if a cop does something wrong. If you heard me earlier, I said the negative video, the public has a right to have access to all body-worn camera. The good stuff that's put out there by the police department, the great rescues, the great instances where police are doing above and beyond work, but also every police-involved shooting is released, whether it's positive reflection on the police, negative reflection on the police, whether they did something right or they did something wrong. I completely agree that there has to be accountability for cops. And I have no problem if body-worn camera is going to show that police officers violated their oath and violated the law, and then that body-worn camera is used against these officers for that purpose. I have no problem whatsoever with that at all.
Ron, what do you now? Let's go into what Tish said recently, right? That she's going to start doing discipline for guys and gals that don't activate the body-worn camera. I mean, we I don't know. I mean, now you're doing. First of all, I'm just going to say this: as a police commissioner, my opinion is you should never force discipline. That's if she even thought that, then I would direct it to my chief of internal affairs bureau, which is her guy, Thompson. I would tell her, hey, tell Thompson, this is what I want you to put out. we're gonna be tougher on people that don't activate the body-worn cameras. We're gonna be tougher on misconduct. But I don't think it's the right thing for the police commissioner to do that. The police commissioner stands for 35,000 uniforms, or now we know it's less than that, civilians, and you represent that whole department. And I think you should always, although you're the main focus, you need to always look at positivity, because you want your police officers, you want your civilians, you want everybody to do the best job you can. And as soon as you start hammering people, that's the worst thing you do, right? So when you know, as a supervisor, right, we all know it's praise in public and criticize in private. And when you put a blanket statement out like this, to me, you're criticizing in public. And it's management 101. It's the worst thing you can do. You're setting the tone that I know she wants to change the department. I know she wants to bring it back in, but there's ways to do it using your staff where you can still give positive feedback to the members in the department so that the good workers, can move forward. Right? How many times where you took somebody in a precinct or your squad, you took them to the side and you said, hey, you're not doing good work, blah, 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 blah. And then you know what? The cops that were working all along, they always said, hey, Sarge, hey, Lou, thanks for doing that, because that guy's been doing that all along. And it's about time somebody recognized it, because we do the right thing every day. Right. So yeah. I just think that what she does publicly like that, to me, it sends a bad taste to every cop out there who is doing the right thing.
And I agree that you shouldn't be white soxing it's an expression in the NYPD, white soxing is when you're going after people for minor violations, things that are inconsequential, like wearing white socks in your boots instead of wearing black socks, because somewhere in the patrol guide it said you're supposed to wear black socks, right, and not have your socks showing. It's inconsequential. I'm for discipline. I'm not a disciplinarian. I was never a quote unquote hammer. I used to attend these risk meetings with Chief Pontillo and his executive staff, and we used to go over in those meetings, like I brought up earlier, part of it, and what she's talking about is people that aren't activating their body-worn cameras. So you would have an audit, and there would be incidences where officers would repeatedly not be activating their cameras. So now, again, where is discipline? Where is discipline relevant? Right? It's supposed to be used to affect a positive change on a behavior, not to be punitive. Right? It sometimes has to be punitive if they do something illegal. Obviously, then there's punishment is punitive, but it's supposed to correct the behavior. So you have to start with the training. And what she says is, oh, all I ever saw was training. And one thing I have to say about the risk meetings is that it was not punitive. It was for training purposes. And we used to sit there and they would point out, because they had a lot more access than we had at command level, and even I had at borough level.
Put 'em up, yep.
Right? So they were able to look in and see how many views everybody has. I think that's changed now because we all complained about that. Like, we'd have to wait for them to tell us how many views each supervisor had so we can tell whether that supervisor was doing the job, and looking at any body-worn camera footage of their subordinates, which they're supposed to do a certain amount of. But if it's repeated behavior, which is what she did say, and then training isn't sufficient because you've already trained and retrained somebody. But to use it to be punitive is not appropriate. And it's supposed to be used in order to have that 20/20 hindsight, to look at the way things were handled, right? A lot of agencies don't even allow random audits of people's body-worn camera footage. They have to be related to a specific incident, or if these officers are on some type of high-profile list, where they're on some type of monitoring list, or we would call it, performance monitoring in the NYPD, then that person, you would look at their body-worn camera to ensure that they are acting, if you're acting within scope of your job. When we do these random audits, and we went real long, coming up on 2 hours, so I'd love to tell stories, but we don't really have the time for it. But I used to do the random audits even as a borough commander, and I never made it punitive unless it was something that was completely egregious and it needed to be addressed. I'll give one quick example. I was looking at a gun collar that was made in one of my PSAs. I was in charge of 3 different PSAs as a borough commander. And I saw the body-worn camera, and then I look at the different offices to look at different views, which is another issue because you have multiple views that people are allowed to look at, which doesn't give the view of the officer involved. But anyway, I noticed that they did something that was a horrible tactics. They split up. One officer chased the guy with the gun. The other officers went a different way. And then when all was said and done, they turned to each other and go, "Where's so-and-so?" They did not even know. They were not even aware that one of their partners was not accounted for. They start calling him on his cell phone. They start looking for him, calling him over the radio. Finally, he comes around the corner. He's pissed. They have a few words, whatever the case may be. Now, I could have taken that and made it some type of punitive action, and took some punitive action against the supervisor that was on the scene, the other members. But what did I do? I did take action. I grounded them. I grounded the team. It was a public safety team. I grounded them. I made phone calls to the chief at the academy. I called up Risk Management Bureau. I got them firearms training, special tactics firearms training. I got them retrained at the academy for tactics. Risk management came down. All retraining. And I was able to fast track it because I was able to call the people I knew and get them to get in right away. So again, could it have been punitive? It could have been punitive, but it didn't need to be punitive. All right. They got caught up in it. They weren't thinking rationally. They made tactical errors that could have cost somebody their life. Other instances that I find where you look at it and you're like, that could have been handled a lot different. What did I do? I sent an email with the video from the dashboard to the CO. Hey, take a look at this and handle it. They didn't have to get back to me because I trusted in my COs to handle it appropriately. And they knew that didn't mean go and hammer the guy. So, but I'm afraid that that's not the general consensus.
There was a couple questions earlier. Somebody had asked, it was way earlier, somebody asked about the use of military weapons and things like that, if it would help the NYPD. And I think two people had asked it. I asked you and me both. I don't know if you missed that. But there was a couple questions I just wanted to answer because there were pretty good questions in the chat. So I would say, yeah, military weapons are good if they're in the right hands. I think that would belong more to ESU, special weapons and stuff like that, depending on what they are. We've had certain military vehicles that were given, and then during one of the presidential administrations, those were taken back from us, and they were useful. And then we ended up getting some of the Lenco Bearcats and Bears. So we supplemented those, but years ago we had a Korean War tank. I think that those both Army tanks have been decommissioned and they're not being used. Then it was another Ron, I'll let you answer that after I'm done. There was another question about somebody coming on in April. They had asked, what would the I think it's tsunami? Am I saying that right? They asked what advice if somebody was coming on in April or whatever. And my quick advice to that person coming on in April was take the job, learn it, and then evaluate it and decide whether you want to stay or not. There's a lot of people would say, don't take the job. I'm gonna say at this point, take the job and learn from it, because you can either you can continue and do your 23 years or 22 years, whatever tier you're in, or you could leave after 5, 10, 15 years and go to another department with the knowledge and understanding that you've learned. So I mean that would be my opinion. Ron, I guess a shout out to Tabitha Foster, right? So
yeah,
hit the like and share and subscribe. Keep the great information coming. Thank you so much, Tabitha. We really appreciate that. Ron, do you want to answer that about any weapons?
I really don't have an opinion on weapons. I was never a big gun buff, big gun buy. I don't have enough knowledge to answer that appropriately where you do. So I'll acquiesce to you. I think that we've had a great discussion tonight on this. We're over 2 hours, so we went really long, but I think it's an important topic to discuss. I think we got a lot of great information out there. I think people see that we have, from our perspective, I think we see things in a bigger picture, and that sometimes the boots on the ground can see. And I hope that that's the way that they're looking at it. Hope they know that we have their back and that our perspective is in no way demeaning to them in any way, shape, or form. It's just that we spent over 30 years each on the job, over 20 years as executives, and we come with a wealth of knowledge from a different perspective, from the executive perspective, and that's what we're trying to share. So we appreciate the support. We should appreciate all the comments. We appreciate you hanging out there, Amazing Ed, for the whole 2 hours, and others. We appreciate the support. And any final thoughts on today?
Again, thank you to our friends and followers. Great comments. Trying to keep up with them all is hard for us. But yeah, like Ron said, this is our perspective. take what we can give, take our information, use it, filter it in your own mind, and decide what's good and what's bad, and use it. That's all. We're trying to give our best perspective. Some of it's old. We're a little older, but it's our perspective, and we just hope that you guys continue watching. Make sure you continue watching the Unfiltered, Finest Unfiltered podcasts, and we appreciate your support.
Yeah, and as you can see, we have our own perspectives. We don't always agree. We don't agree. We can agree to disagree. It's we have different perspectives from our different life experiences and our job experiences. So we have different perspectives on it, and we're just here to share our perspectives. I've always said about the Finest Unfiltered is a podcast is not a newscast. We're telling you our perspective. We're sharing our views on things, and we appreciate the fact that you want to hear us talk for 2 hours and hear about that. So again, shout out Arbad 9.99, Diet Coke and a bagel. Thanks for the show. Pretty good for old guys. Oh, thanks, Arbad. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We appreciate everybody watching.
Is that wait, Ron? Was that Metamucil and?
Oh yeah,
it was Metamucil and Scone. But wasn't there Eric Umansky is coming up, Ron? Did you want to speak about that?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. So tomorrow on the Sal Greco show at 12:05, you have Eric Umansky, who's the editor at large for ProPublica, will be on with Sal to discuss current happenings within the administration. He's the one that published the report on. There he is, right there. He's the one that published the report, the article we spoke about earlier with the mayor and how his secretive unit was ridden with abuses. So he'll be on tomorrow at 12:05, and then the guys will be back with the roundtable on Friday for 08:05 with Sal Greco and our friend Marlon Bethel and Eric and John on the Finest Unfiltered. So until next Wednesday, 5:05 p.m. for the Executive Perspective. Be safe, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you for.